Hayo minasan. Welcome back to our playthrough of Our Life, Beginning and Always. We are continuing because the DLC for Step 3 is out. So obviously I want to show that to you guys. I want to see what this adds to the story and what this adds to the characters. So we're literally going to continue where we left off. Hold on one second. Okay, it just, for some reason, it took a second for it to actually load on the screen. So, as you can see, we have 5 new moments that we can go through. Reflection, late shift, serendipity, boating, and happiness. We're obviously going to just go in them in order. We're going to do reflection first, and depending on how long that goes, we might get into late shift, although this just might be an extra 5 episodes for you guys. We shall see. But this is literally just adding on to what we've done before. So, this will be fun. I think this will be enjoyable. I can't wait. I really can't wait. And I'm so excited about all this. Really excited. Hopefully you guys are hearing the music. It's not showing that the music's that loud, but hopefully you guys are hearing it over my voice, behind my voice. But let's go. Let's hit the road. Reflection. After finishing breakfast at the Holden house, you and Cove had retreated to his room to relax before starting the day in earnest. Or perhaps you would take it easy for the whole afternoon. Neither of you had plans exactly, so you were free to do whatever came to your mind. Oh, choices. I forgot how many choices. I always get choices. I want to fiddle with his hair. You ran your fingers through the short strands, flipping them between your fingers as if you were a hairstylist assessing a new look. Really though, you just liked the way the bristles tickled your fingers. Even with your mind elsewhere, you could tell Cove was similarly at ease. He had his chin propped up with one hand as he scrolled through his phone. A burst of laughter broke through the silence, hooking your attention and bringing you back to the present. You looked at Cove for explanation. His eyes, now crinkled in mirth, were still locked on his screen. Are you gonna let me in on the joke? He finally looked up at you, smirking. Dad scanned some old photos, you know. He drew a rectangle in the air with a phone-free hand. Printed out ones, back from when I was little. He texted it all to me last night, I guess. I've been checking them out. Oh, do we get to see cute little Cove? Oh, you were looking at kitty photos and didn't tell me? Cove narrowed his eyes, smile still bent. I was going to show you. I just wanted to look at it first, make sure there was nothing super embarrassing. You never know with my dad. He grimaced, envisioning what horrors his dad might unwittingly spring on him.
I mean...
What if there's a photo of me getting potty? Cove! I can't blame him. Kid pictures are supposed to be embarrassing. That's part of the fun, Cove. He was holding out on you, but your protest was of no use. Cove only cleared his throat nervously, the fear of his dad's well-meaning actions still looming large in his mind. Anyway, before we forget, I was laughing because I came across a Halloween one from when I was 8. The year I was a zombie, remember? He shook his head, grinning wryly. I hate words! Wryly, while holding the phone out to you. I said that wrong no matter what I did, didn't I? He's so cute! Oh, look how cute. He's so cute. He's so cute as a little kid. I love this. This is adorable. Oh, and he would have had to get the cast off. Oh, when did you get the cast off, my dear boy? It's adorable. Oh, that's adorable. I never even liked zombies. All I wanted was to show off my new scar, and it needed to be something scary. I couldn't be a normal person who had a scar according to my 8-year-old mind. I was a little dork.
Right?
Dad really wanted to be useful as usual, and he came up with the idea of being an undead person. It was pretty good, huh? I remember you getting lots of extra candy when the adults realized the scar was real. It must have been your greatest Halloween haul ever. Cove chuckled at your reply. I can't believe how much larger my scar used to be. He looked looked down at his arm with a soft smile on his face and traced what remained of the jagged line with his fingers, just as you had seen him do countless times before. His voice was playful when he spoke again. Look at how tiny it is now. How am I gonna pretend to be a tough without a big scar? Cove, you've never fooled anyone. You better not do anything stupid just to get a new scar. That's what I'm gonna say, no matter how much you like them. I won't. Cove smiled bashfully, pleased with his joke, and ducked his head to look away from you. His fingers were still tracing the scarred patch of skin. I really do like having this, even if it's kind of little these days. His voice was shy, like he was letting you in on a big secret. Cove turned back to face you fully, finally letting go of his scar. He was happy. That mark was a part of him and clearly held meaning for Cove. I'm gonna ask, can I touch your scar? He blinked, taken aback by the request, but nodded easily.
It's okay.
Oh, Cove! You cupped his arm with your fingers carefully as your thumb ran down the outline of his scar. Along with the rougher tissue of the scar, you could also feel goosebumps on his arm. Cove let out a choked breath, a dizzied smile playing out on his face. It was evident that he liked the feeling. Your hold shifted so you could bring his forearm to your face. Cove quietly gasped when he realized what you were doing. You tenderly kissed the old wound that marked him. Cove squeaked at the feeling of your lips on him, and in that spot in particular, but his expression was overwhelmingly one of adoration. Oh, look at his face! Oh, I forgot how adorable you were, Cove. It's been too long. Cove couldn't stay still and reached out for you himself with his free hand, his fingers brushing against your cheek. He leaned forward, eyes gleaming. We're gonna get interrupted, aren't we? You automatically began to match his movement, pulling nearer to him. His cheeks burned red as he closed the gap between you, his mouth gently meeting yours. You held his arm like a lifeline as you kissed him back, briefly worried that you might drown in the depths of your feelings. Then you opened your eyes, meeting Cove's, and knew the feeling was mutual. Oh, we weren't interrupted. I'm shocked. He laid his forehead against yours. You felt a hot breath tickling your face. Heads touching, your right hand on his arm, you were intertwined with Cove. It felt so right. Time couldn't register in that moment. It couldn't have been seconds or minutes, and eventually you straightened up, lifting your hand from the scar. That seemed to break the spell. Though he stayed close to you, Cove sat up and came to his senses. Your eyes drifted back to the scar on Cove's arm. The scar had been there as long as you'd known Cove, although when you'd first met, it had been concealed by that neon pink cast.
So?
Do you want to hear how it happened? How I was hurt? You were initially stunned that he had guessed what you were thinking, though given the topic of conversation and the direction of your gaze, it was a natural conclusion to reach. Not bothered by your reaction, Cove continued with a shrug. I don't mind telling you, it's nothing special. He rubbed the back of his neck, grinning sheepishly. Mostly it's just really dumb. You nodded. That was something you'd like to hear more about, especially knowing that no lasting harm had come from it. Cove stared into the distance, lips parted as he readied the story in his mind. So me, my dad, and my mom were at a party. I don't know if it was casual get-together or a specific celebration. I hope it wasn't something meaningful, considering how I ended it. He winced and then managed a bashful smile. Anyway, my mom and dad were off doing stuff, talking to people, I guess. I was left with the other non-adults. Most of them were older than I was. Maybe all of them were. His brow furrowed as he tried to recall the dusty memories. Then he shrugged and continued. Blech. The older kids were taking turns at the jet skis. There wasn't enough for everyone to ride at once, so in between turns they were hanging out on the shore. I was meant to just sit there with them and watch. Remembering when you'd first met Cove, you bet he hadn't been satisfied with that arrangement. He confirmed that suspicion. I was pretty unhappy. It wasn't a party for me. Not when all I could do was look at other people have fun when I couldn't. The teens must have realized that, though I never hid when I was pouting as a kid. Only when you were a kid? Cove bristled with embarrassment. It looked pretty sulky to you. Come on, let me finish the story. All right. Cove Cove sighed, letting go of the interruption and picking up where he left off.
Well,
Basically, someone offered to let me ride. I was way too small to drive it myself, but this older kid, they must have been at least 16, said I could sit in front of them while they controlled the jet ski. I knew I wasn't supposed to do anything like that, but I still figured my parents were doing whatever they wanted, so why couldn't I? I nodded at the person, and I remember the other teens helping me on the jet ski, along with the one driving. We sped off into the water. Cove smiled, widely and wistfully. It was amazing at first. My hair was flying everywhere as we zoomed away from the shore. I loved being out on the water like that. Too bad it turned out steering a jet ski with an 8-year-old sat on your lap was harder than a bunch of kids had figured out it would be. The teen tried their best, but they couldn't keep control for long. We got spun around and went right into the sand. You sucked in a deep breath. The other person wasn't hurt. Thankfully, they held on to the bars and stayed in their seat. I didn't. I was thrown at full speed into a rocky part of the shore near the dock. I must have tried to brace for impact or catch myself, because my arm is what I mostly landed on. He looked down at the limb in question. You could see him visualizing the long-healed injury. It was pretty torn up. After that, it's hazy for me. I got taken to the hospital. I didn't feel a lot of pain when it first happened. All I remember was thinking about how I was covered in sand and the grains were uncomfortable. Alright, hold on a minute, guys. Sorry, somebody is trying to get into things that are not hers. The sand was uncomfortable? Cove chuckled. I know, right? I did start feeling my arm later. It definitely hurt eventually. The doctor said my arm was broken, along with being torn open, and that's how I ended up getting my pink cast. He smiled nostalgically. That color. It seemed just nice and happy at the time. It brightened the mood, so I picked it. The smile faded. He finished the story with a sigh, his eyes downcast. I feel bad that I did any of that. I hope whoever that teen was weren't traumatized by seeing a little kid go flying into the ground. They were just trying to do a nice thing. Cove threw his arms out to the side dramatically. I wish I knew who they were so I could give them a call and say I'm still in one piece. But yeah, that's the full story. I'm glad you were both okay in the long run. That's the important thing, is that you were both okay. Cove sighed again, the regret written plainly on his face. It was a failure. That's just the truth. He smiled flatly. But to my credit, I think I've grown a lot since then. Wait. Cove's eyes went completely wide. Suddenly reinvigorated, he seized his phone and tapped away at the screen. What's up? I knew it! You weren't sure that he'd heard you, but he set his phone down and turned to face directly to you. His face was resolute. Though the glow of the screen was no longer reflected in his eyes, they seemed to sparkle even brighter than before. Blue, we're adults! We can decide things for ourselves now! Oh, Cove. Oh, Cove. You only realized this just now? The age requirement to ride a jet ski in California is 18. We can totally do it! Oh God. You want to break another bone? Cove pouted, his lower lip jutting out, which didn't back up what he said next.
Come on.
I'm not a little kid. You don't have to worry. Within a moment, Cove had recovered and returned to his serious expression from before. I'll be careful, and I really want you to be there when I try again, please. His voice was soft and earnest. You could tell how much the request meant to him. You also knew him enough to know that he wasn't going to give up on this idea. Letting him go on his own wasn't an option. I can't refuse those puppy eyes. It be interesting to try jet skis. Cove perked up at once, a grin stretched wide across his face. He was practically bouncing in place. Let's go! You got up and worked as a team to gather everything needed for the trip. Cove's other aquatic hobbies came in handy, and he was quickly knitted out with everything he needed other than the jet skis themselves. You needed to run back home briefly, having dressed and prepared for the day that didn't involve jet skiing, but soon enough you were both ready to jump into Cove's car. As you got in, you learned that Cove had used the brief time apart to locate a rental store on his phone. You caught his eye as you clicked your seatbelt into place. Excited, you held out a hand. Cove slapped it in a high five before setting off. You and Cove soon arrived. The ocean was perfectly inviting today. The deep blue of the water glittered under the clear sky while the tide rolled in and out of its leisure. I'm so excited for this! His excitement was totally adorable. Seeing how pleased you were, Cove grinned at you.
Hey!
Oh, hey! I want to say hi to my dad while we're here. I already texted my mom about the plan. And they were all okay with this? Cove! He's working right now. You remembered how close his shop was. It wouldn't take long even by walking. Yeah, let's go brighten his day with our cheery faces. Mr. Holden was a great guy, so you were happy to check in on him.
Sorry.
Yes, thanks. Sorry it might be kind of awkward when he hears why we're here, but it should be alright. I mean, my parents forgave me a long time ago for that amazing stunt. You hope. I don't want to be scared off jet skiing my whole life because of it. You wondered which of you Cove was attempting to reassure. It was only a short walk back down to the dock from Mr. Holden's scuba shop. Cove breezed in, as familiar with the store as he was with his own home. The place was quiet, empty aside from a couple of customers quietly browsing and Cove's dad behind the counter. Mr. Holden looked up, his friendly expression spreading into a grin when he saw who had just entered.
Hey!
Hey, Blue! Hey, sport! What brings you all the way out here? I forgot what voice I gave him. I'm hoping it's as close to what I just did. He cast an eye at the way the two of you were dressed. Judging by how you're decked out, I'm guessing scuba diving. There's plenty here for that. What can I help you with? Nope, we're not going scuba diving, mister! Cove chuckled, amused by how quickly his dad seized on his favorite topic, or maybe it was how his dad always felt over himself trying to be useful. Hi, Dad. We're not doing that this time. We sort of decided to go rent a couple of jet skis. The phrase jet skis had set Mr. Holden's mouth in a taut line immediately. Jet skis? It's like he knows he has the bad memory. He echoed the words as his eyes instinctively darted to the scar on Cove's arm. That's when... Oh, bad memories. Mr. Holden started to speak several times, each attempt quickly abandoned. Cove smiled encouragingly, trying not to add to his father's worries.
Don't worry about it.
I promise I'll be careful, and Blue will be there too. I'm there, okay? I am the person apparently that brings reassurance. Great. We always look out for each other. Mr. Holden pinched his face back in an unconvincing smile.
Right.
All right. You're a whole lot bigger now than you were back then. Heck, you can drive a car and everything. I'm sure you and Blue will have plenty of fun. The worry still echoed out in his voice, barely concealed by the positive words, but Cove was buoyed by his father's support. Yeah, well, we're all set. We only stopped by to say hi and let you know since we were over here. Mr. Holden beamed, obviously moved by his son's simple consideration. Wow, you're so thoughtful. Thanks for taking out the time. Cove gave his dad a crooked smile. Shaking his head bashfully, he'd long stopped fighting his dad's effusive praise, but that didn't mean he'd ever become good at accepting it. Mr. Holden simply laughed at his son's response. It'd be great if you could keep me in the loop while you're out there too. Just text me and let me know it's going well. Or anything. I will. His dad smiled more easily.
Great.
Oh, you said that at the same time! Damn it, Mr. Holden! Cove rubbed his arm, causing Mr. Holden's eyes to momentarily twitch back to the childhood injury.
Bye.
We're gonna head out. See you later. Take care. Don't work too hard. Mr. Holden waved you off as you left the store. The pair of you headed back to the docks, walking side by side. After your feet hit the boards, Cove's pace fell. Glancing over, you saw him looking down, out over the water. That wouldn't have been unusual if his expression hadn't been so somber. He wasn't geared up with anticipation or even nervousness, but with an uncharacteristic lethargy. Lethargy. I'm saying that wrong, I just know it. Something was weighing heavily on his mind. Gonna walk right off to the sea if you don't pay attention. Huh? He blinks, struck by your interrupting at his rumination.
Sorry.
He sighed. Though you'd torn his attention from the ocean, it gradually drifted back to the water. You cleared your throat, unwilling to lose him again. Sorry again. He put his hands to his face, rubbing his eyes wearily. Here I go, thinking everything's resolved and that's with what's happened and we can have fun, but I can't just enjoy everything. I had to find something else to get stuck in my head. You're having second thoughts about jet skiing?
No.
No, that's not it. The ends of his lips were drawn into the beginning of a frown, like gray clouds clustering into a coming storm. I figured my dad would be a little worried about me doing it, but what he was saying, it wasn't what I expected. He was so sad. It was more than nervous. I think he feels bad, and now I feel bad. But it isn't as if I'm the only one who's ever done something stupid or gotten hurt. It got me thinking about that whole time. That's when I realized it wasn't long after that accident that my parents separated. Oh, Cove. Hadn't you noticed that before? Well, I kind of did. But not exactly in the way I'm seeing it now. As a kid, I didn't think about the consequences of my actions, you know? Or how what I did impacted other people. Like, why should I care? I'm the one doing it, not them. It made no sense. And I still cared when other people did things I didn't like. But I was 8, and mostly just mad that nothing felt like it was in my control. You could tell that he was building up to something, so you nodded for him to continue. It was pretty difficult to deal with because of that attitude. But looking back, I think that's what saved me from something a lot of kids go through. Blaming themselves for their parents' divorce. It never crossed my mind that anything I did made a difference on my mom or dad's relationships. That they would do what they did no matter what. Now, though, I guess it's kind of hard to ignore that thought, huh?
I mean...
Their situation was already so hard, and I wasn't a good kid, so... He left his words adrift as he looked down, the conclusion unfinished. It was silent between you. But only for a second. Cove pulled himself up to his full height, his chin held aloft. Whatever he decided, he was resolute. I'm going back. I've got to talk to my dad. I'm not gonna let things be like before, where I could feel crappy and refuse to even tell him what was going on. That doesn't work for either of us. You can go ahead if you want. I won't mind. I still really want to do this. And I'm sure it'll be okay. There's no way you're going off on your own. Hell no! What world do you think I'd actually let you, charged full of emotions, go off into a confrontation? We always look out for each other, remember? Cove smiled gently, having wanted that deep down. Thanks. Let's go. You and Cove retook your steps down the dock once more, heading back to Mr. Holden's scuba shop. The customers you'd spotted in there before were now leaving the store, new bags clutched in their hands. You hoped this would mean that Cove could have his conversation without a public audience. This time, Cove strode inside the shop.
How's it going?
Ready? Hello again. Forget something? Sort of. Cove had reached the counter now. You needed to rush just to keep up with him as he crossed the show floor. Mr. Holden raised an eyebrow, taking in Cove's shift in attitude, and chose his next words with care. Is everything alright? Cove swallowed, not answering initially. Talking openly with his dad was still something new for the son. You knew that he struggled for the right way to begin. I wanted to ask about what happened. Mr. Holden winced as the words had struck him physically. The accident? No, the divorce. Oh, Cove. Still don't think this is the right time to bring this up, buddy. The pained expression fell from Mr. Holden's face. Wide-eyed, his jaw slacked. He gaped at Cove.
Huh?
Why? 'Cause Cove is thinking you might be at fault for that? Cove glanced over his shoulder at you. Your eyes met. You saw him draw confidence by having you by his side. He turned back to his father. I want to know the truth. His tone was grave. Did me getting into that accident hurt your marriage? If I hadn't done it, would you and Mom have gotten along better? Aww, Cove boy. No, hell no! Mr. Holden quashed the suggestions with a gravity you rarely heard in his voice. You were 8 years old. You're not responsible in any way. Kyra and I should have protected you. I can understand why you're feeling that. What happened was so horrible. How could it not have an impact? It did. It was a reflection of us as parents. The relationship between just your mom and me was separate and already unsalvageable. Cove turned away, his brow still furrowed as he looked at the floor. Maybe I'm just being anxious and it's taking over, but it wasn't just then. I always caused problems. He plowed on, unwilling to give up without explaining his worries. What if I'd been easier to raise? Or you'd had me later on? Maybe even if you hadn't met at all, it might have been better for the two of you. Cove! If I didn't have you, what good would my life be? Mr. Holden didn't let the words hang unchallenged in the air for even a second. He hurried over to Cove, taking his son's arms in his hands. Cove, listen. There's only one person to blame for things not working, and that's me. Cove opened his mouth to speak, but Mr. Holden forced on, determined to erase any question in Cove's mind. I'm not saying this to dishonestly push accountability off from someone else or to throw a pity party for myself. You want to know the truth, so that's what I'm giving you. Your father is the reason our family couldn't stay together. You think you caused trouble? You should have seen me at your age. You're such a good kid. I hardly believe how good you are. Mr. Holden's eyes were misty as he squeezed his son's arms. There's nothing, absolutely nothing, you need to blame yourself for. I'm sorry, Cove. To you and to Kyra. Mom? Yeah, your mom. His pained face eased slightly into a bittersweet smile. Kyra, she was just so smart and driven and completely bursting with life. It was as if she could do anything. You know, there wasn't a single, solitary person who didn't even want a piece of her attention, just to catch her eye for a moment. But for some crazy reason, she had a soft spot for my 17-year-old screwed up self. That's when we first met, though. It definitely took some time before I managed to ask her out on a date. Mr. Holden shook his head, then the smile melting as his recollection became solemn once more. And then, we'd only been officially together for about 6 months when we found out we were having a baby. I was so worried, so scared, but she was so brave. She was my rock. But we both knew the road ahead was going to be rockier. When we got married, I didn't see it as a dream come true. I wasn't about to start living my life in the only way I can imagine doing so. I thought what happened happened, and throwing my cards in with a girl like her was worth the risk. He grimaced, the sentence sour in his mouth, regretting his past perspective. I'd been taking care of myself on my own and getting by. Then all of a sudden I was gonna have a wife and a child.
That's...
So I thought, alright, I'd better step things up and take care of all of us. And that's what I did. Sort of. He rolled his eyes. I made money, I kept a roof over our heads, I put food on the table. But I was always busy, focused on taking care of things, that I didn't stop to consider what anyone else was thinking, or what they actually needed. I made every decision about what I did, and as a result, what happened to the family, by myself, never asking what your mom felt or was wondering if she might have an opinion. I'd tell Kyra about a great place I'd found, how we'd be moving there in the same breath. Or that I'd spent all our savings and taken out a loan to start this business we're standing in, and even more nonsense. Anything I felt I needed to do, I did. Kyra couldn't even ask where I'd been all day without me rolling my eyes like she'd been a nag. I was making sure we didn't starve, obviously, right? Couldn't she trust me? Oh, Mr. Holden. He sighed, his head hung low.
Gosh.
She went to school part-time while raising you. Really knuckling down, but that didn't matter to me back then. She could have spent her days lying in bed, not dying, and I would have felt the same. I didn't care. I was gonna get it all done on my own either way. It was so stupid. I admired her more than anyone when there was nothing at stake. Yet as soon as responsibilities were involved, I couldn't let myself rely on her. He combed his hand through his hair, searching for an understanding of his own younger self. I'm not even sure why. Maybe I had something to prove. Maybe I'm the one who didn't trust her in the end. Poor Kyra. She had to spend every day mentally weighing the pros and cons of putting up with my horrible ideas for the sake of peace, or trying to explain to my blockheaded self that what I was doing was wrong. It must have been so stressful and frustrating. Constantly having to let everything go because I was stubborn and would absolutely make a fight out of it. He snorted bitterly. I was definitely stuck in my head those days. Our relationship at that point was made of arguments and cool tolerance. But I still genuinely didn't see the divorce coming. We made it through the first years after all. I never really considered it ending. That was just how life was. In retrospect, it's clear Kyra kept thinking on it more every year. Especially because she managed to finish her journalism degree. And with us being more stable, financially that is. She thought of everything. She even timed it right when your school ended for the year, so the process would hopefully all settle before you had to worry about class again. We were already talking about it before the accident ever happened. I know I took it really hard, being a sad sack all around the neighborhood. But even that is unfair to me. When it shook out, I'm the one who got everything. Kyra didn't want to leave you, Cove. She never would have. I'm certain she felt like she had no choice but to end the relationship. The business was doing really well then, so I had an easier time of making a living. She was between jobs. When she did get a new job, it meant that she'd be traveling all the time. That's why she willingly accepted me having full custody. She didn't get to be there with her child for so many moments. And you had to spend half your life growing up without your mom. And that's my fault. Mr. Holden closed his eyes briefly as he took in a breath. So that's it. The story of Cliff and Kyra's marriage. Not exactly a fairy tale. But I want to be clear. You saw his grip on Cove's arm tighten. No matter what happened with me and her, I never, ever want to miss out on being your dad. Cove's throat bobbed as he swallowed. His eyes glistened, glossy with tears that had yet to fall. He blinked quickly and trying to hold them back. Thank you for telling me. His voice was hoarse, little more than a whisper. Mr. Holden brought a hand up to his face and lightly nudged Cove's chin. You're welcome. You're a grown-up now, right? You deserve the truth. That's the least I can do for you. Cove managed a fragile smile. Thank you. For taking care of me. For all of it. Mr. Holden brushed the compliment off with a wave of his hand.
No worries.
It was nothing. Look where we ended up. I got this whole entire store, a house, friends here, a very thoughtful son. It's all good for me.
I'm so glad.
Oh, Cove. His voice was quiet, and he ducked his head shyly after saying the words. Mr. Holden patted him on the back. You could see the tears in Cove's eyes still shining and threatening to spill over. Mr. Holden put an arm around his shoulder, gently steering him towards the door. You should go have fun. Make some nice memories. Cove's gaze flickered over to you. The watery smile of his face solidified. All right. Good. Now out you go. Mr. Holden nudged the two of you out of the shop. You both walked silently as you made your return to the docks. Cove's face was pensive, clearly still digesting everything his dad said. He finally sighed, catching your attention. He hesitantly reached for a bag he had brought and raised it up.
Blue,
I want to call my mom. I'm not going to leave her out of things, and I want to know what she thinks about what happened and all of that. He fiddled with the straps of his bag. It still remained closed shut. It's not like I don't trust Dad. It's just, Mom's thoughts are important too. That's not a bad idea. I bet she'd have some interesting things to add. He seemed relieved that you understood. You knew he didn't want to be a bother with another delay. Thanks. I guess there's no time like the present. Time to ask. With that mini pep talk, he finally opened his bag and found his phone. Cove unlocked it quickly and tapped over his favorite contacts. He called up for his mom and put the phone on speaker as it dialed. Kyra must have had her phone close because she answered almost immediately. Cove, this is a pleasant surprise. I thought you'd be getting back to me later. Hey, Mom. He paused for a second, then looked at you. You're on speaker with Blue, too. Hi, Kyra. Oh, hello. I'm popular today. Oh, what's going on? Don't keep me in suspense. Are you a pro jet skier already? Cove chuckled and scratched the back of his head. We haven't started yet. Actually, there's something I kind of want to ask you about.
Really?
Really? I'm intrigued. Her voice was bright and excited. Cove moved the phone closer to his face so he could speak softly, aware of the tone of the conversation was about to change. I was talking to Dad earlier about your relationship and why you both divorced. That one syllable had lost all her earlier energy. Cove tightened his grip on his phone. It does make sense that the past would come up today. Yeah, but... He tried to brighten up the mood again. You weren't used to him being the perky one of the two. You can only imagine it felt like a strange role reversal for him. Dad said you were really amazing. He admired you a lot. What a flatterer! She sighed wistfully, and you could hear some interference. Maybe she had shaken her head. You couldn't tell for sure. Oh, Cliff. He bungled himself through regular, everyday adulting and social situations in astounding, charming ways. Yet, somehow, at the exact same time, he was ambitious, slightly shady, under-the-table type of man when it came to making his living in the world. So essentially, your father was an absolute heartthrob for someone such as myself. Cove and Kyra laughed delicately. The tension was broken into something lighter, more familiar between the two. It's cool that you both have nice things to say about each other. I agree, baby. She took a moment before continuing carefully. Do you have questions about what happened? I'm not sure. Cove squinted at the phone in his hands as he tried to think, his free hand brushing through his hair. I just kind of wanted to know how you describe what it was like. Could I tell you what Dad said about it?
All right.
I don't think Cliff would mind. Whatever he told you is probably what he'd say to me. All right, go for it. After taking a breath, Cove recapped Cliff's experience, doing his best to follow his dad's story. He went into a surprising amount of detail, and not a single thing was missed. Kyra listened in absolute silence, letting her son speak without interruption. When Cove finished, he took another deep inhale of air. So, what do you think? Kyra sighed softly. You heard a clacking noise like she was drumming her nails on the back of her phone or on a countertop. That definitely sounds like Clifford. It's not exactly wrong, but he doesn't have a total picture. He puts the emphasis on the wrong places, I think.
Huh?
What do you mean? For starters, Cliff unsurprisingly downplayed himself more than he had to. He did? Cove's eyebrows raised, and his face continued to inch even closer to the screen. Well, since your dad was so praising of me, it's only fair I return the favor. When Cliff said he was already taking care of himself when he met me, he means he was on his own. Cliff's own parents were, and still aren't, friendly people. They always had a combative relationship, though him getting into drinking and gambling as a teenager didn't help. He knew they'd kick him out at 18, so he saved them the trouble and left home at 17. He always found a way to make it work, even without support. I met him a few months after that. We hit it off right away. He was exactly what I wanted back then. We dated, and then about a half a year later, bam, you were on the way, Cove. She laughed fondly as Cove clung to every word. I was really optimistic about it all. I couldn't wait to be a mother. And I was more than happy that Cliff was the father who'd be along for the ride. We got married quick before you were born. Cliff's recollection of our wedding dynamic is pretty spot on. He was extremely stubborn and, well, immature. Highly, highly immature. Her voice raised slightly, and you got the feeling she was thinking back to her memories of living with him. She left the specifics unknown. Sorry about that. But it's not like I was grown up either. Everyone except maybe Cliff could see our relationship was no good. Or at least, not good enough yet to commit to. I knew, but I didn't want to give it up. I wanted to keep the family together. I thought that if we divorced or were never together, we'd ruin your life, Cove. Obviously, that wasn't true. I just didn't have enough experience at the time to realize there was only one option for us. Maybe things would have been easier on you if we'd split when you were still a baby. But it took me years to start figuring it all out. Cove nodded, even if his mom couldn't see it, thinking hard about something. He was likely remembering his own experiences back then. We were married, but never seriously loved each other. We hardly knew each other. I don't mind that Cliff never viewed marrying me as some kind of dream come true. I honestly just appreciated he was trying to give me, my hastily made life plan, a shot. I was the one who proposed, after all. Got down on one knee and everything. Oh, Kyra. She huffed slightly, something between a chuckle and a sigh. It's very funny and a little sad that Cliff still doesn't know why things changed between us. It's obvious to me. I guess he does know deep down. He just never consciously made the connection.
It's alright.
I'm not even mad that he didn't say the same towards me. Love makes everything different. But you said... I know what I said. She interrupted before Cove could even finish his blurted-out interjection. I don't mean Cliff and I. We were just two kids in a relationship that only ever worked when it was its easiest. And then you were born, little Cove James Holden. I loved you immediately, and so did your father. Cove was stunned. His eyes started watering as his mouth clamped shut. The inclination we had towards each other paled in the face of that. Our love for you was the real deal. Cove was the proudest papa. And then in true Cove fashion, tears began to fall. He stayed silent, but you were pretty sure Kyra knew the effect her words had on her son. No matter how much time passed, Cliff never got over how amazing it was to have such a precious little boy of his. I should have taken pictures of how he'd buff up whenever somebody referred to you as his son. Oh, Kyra. Kyra! That's adorable! She sounded so much cheerier now. A slight smile crept onto Cove's face despite his tears. Then again, he still does that now. It wasn't hard to imagine Mr. Holden lighting up around baby Cove the same way he did with 18-year-old Cove. I remember how, when a real argument started brewing, Cliff had a habit of walking away to cool off. He wasn't able to handle it. His son seems to have taken after him in that way. You heard her chuckle and Cove looked down, a blush clear on his cheeks. You could just feel her smirk through the phone. She breezed over the next section airily. For our whole relationship, he always ended fights by skipping out on me for who knows how long. I don't even think Cliff knew when he'd come back. That stopped when you were born. Cliff stopped running. He was still gone a lot for work, and we still had fights, but he wouldn't leave. Instead, he'd go to your room, Cove. If you were asleep, he'd just sulk on the ground by your crib until you woke up. Sometimes he'd pace the room while holding you or sit on the floor and rock you. He'd stay with you until one of us decided we were ready to talk again. We didn't have a lot of furniture back then. It's part of the reason why Cliff was always hanging out on the floor. He really came to embrace it. When our relationship got bad enough that we didn't want to share a bed anymore, he always made sure I got to have the mattress. He insisted I set up a spot in the corner of the nursery, just in case you needed anything through the night. He gave you a more private space when you got bigger, but he still always made sure he could be there for you. There's still no denying, whether Cliff understands or not, he made his choices without prioritizing me. But it wasn't that he suddenly hated me. To Cliff, I was only a wife on paper. In his mind, I was a cool girl he had dated and generally liked. Nothing close to being the light of his life. All his blood, sweat, and tears weren't for himself, or for me, or for even the family unit. They were all completely and totally for his baby. Aww! They're making me have feels! Meanwhile, I was doing the same, though in an opposite way. I did take us being married seriously. I was trying to force us together as a couple, so we would be a complete family for a child. You felt like a fly on the wall of a very personal conversation. Cove didn't seem to notice when you looked over at him, his face a complicated patchwork of emotions.
I guess.
Eventually I woke up and saw what I was doing. I realized it wasn't going to work, not like that. When I was ready for it, I talked to Cliff about separating and starting the divorce process. He was shocked by it, and unfortunately, it wasn't too long after that you had your accident, Cove. Blue, I don't know how much Cove has really told you about it, but when he broke his arm, it terrified all of us. Cove could have died. Even back then, we knew he'd likely have a permanent scar he'd have to live with forever. Our parenting hurt our child, and he was the one who had to carry the repercussions. You were a bit taken back to be referred to directly. You still felt a little out of place, and she seemed completely focused on her son. Cove grimaced and the hand holding his phone shook. Mom. Tyra continued as if she'd never paused. It was heartbreaking, and then on top of it all, we had to put you through your parents breaking up. Taking that back wasn't an option, despite the timing. It felt like everything we had worked hard for, to make you happy, was for nothing. I chose to believe we'd fix our lives from there, but to Cliff, it seemed hopeless. He failed his son. It was easier for me in some ways. I had my family to lean on, and that made it feel less daunting, less impossible. Cliff only had really known about being on his own, by the happenstance of his birth, and then by choice. When we broke up, he knew he was going to have to put back the pieces of what was left, alone. I wanted to be there for him, even after everything, but I was the one divorcing him. It was impossible. I never managed to be someone he truly relied on, and I had to remember that wasn't changing. As bleak as it felt at the time, Cliff still tried not to let any of that show to you, Cove. He did what he could to keep your spirits high about the move, your new house, the scar, everything. So that's why. Cove trailed off. He had misunderstood the impact his injury had on his parents. You were reminded of something that made more sense now. Mr. Holden had been so helpful with Cove's old Halloween costume because he didn't want Cove to be saddened by the scar. It was clear Cove was coming to the same realizations. Now, with all that said, if Cliff was a completely perfect and wonderful guy, I wouldn't have left him. If it was even pretty good, I would have stayed. It was hard not to have custody. Sometimes I felt I was the fun aunt rather than the mom I always wanted to be. I might have overcompensated a little at times because of that. She forced a laugh, but it had an uncomfortable edge to it. You could tell she was trying to blow off a very real anxiety of hers. Cove looked ready to say something, but his mom kept talking, kept moving forward. Still, it's not Cliff's fault alone that our relationship didn't work. We were always better as co-parents than spouses. But I knew when separating that wasn't going to be even. And Cove, the only reason I could stand not being there for you all the time is because I knew the situation was reversed. I could have provided a more stable environment. Cliff would have done the same. Your dad would give up his house, his shop, and even his right arm if it would guarantee you were safe and happy. So, as painful as it was, I'm sure you'd be okay because you were still with someone who loved you more than anything else in the world. Cove lowered his head, tears falling to the ground. He tried to speak. It took him a few tries. Thank you for telling me. His voice cracked and Kyra made an alarm sound at the other end of the line. I'm so sorry, baby. I didn't mean to make you cry.
I get it.
It's okay. He was still crying. Everyone could tell, being physically present or not. I love you, Mom. You've always been my mom. Not some aunt. My mom. I love you too. Her tone was thick with emotion. She was on the edge of a voice break herself. I'm so lucky to be your mom. She started to sniffle openly.
Don't worry about that.
Don't feel bad for me with how it worked out. I promise that nothing was your fault, and it's not as though I'm completely miserable over here. I have an incredible life with a beautiful baby boy of my own who calls whenever he can. At that, Cove's tears only came down heavier. Thank you. Kyra sighed affectionately, and you could hear the warmth in her voice. I think that's good for now. Maybe we should end the call? Take a moment? Is that really all right? He tightened his grip on his phone. You could see how emotionally exhausted he looked.
Of course.
Of course! We'll be in touch soon. For now, you'll only be able to keep thanking me or apologizing.
Hey!
Aw! Cove cried out defensively over the accusation, making his mom snigger. Bye, and goodbye to you, Blue. I'm glad you're there for my baby. Talk to you later. Bye, Mom. I love you. Love you too. Cove hung up and let his hand drop to his side, his phone brushing the fabric of his wetsuit. His other hand went up to his face. He tried to wipe the tears from his eyes. His face was red, and he struggled to put his phone back in his bag once handed. You could tell he was getting worked up. He finally just used both his hands and sealed his phone back into its normal place. Cove sniffled and then reached out for you. His hand trembled in your grasp and you squeezed back. He needed to feel your support. You want to go see your dad again? He didn't have to tell you what was on his mind for this. Cove nodded his head weakly. You rushed back the way you came, feet pounding across the boards of the dock to return to the scuba shop for the third time. I love this. This is perfect. Cove and his dad needed like a real moment in normal story. I'm sad that this has to be DLC, but they needed a moment, and I'm glad you're getting it, and I'm glad I could show you guys this. You reached his dad's store, and Cove still wasn't slowing down. He pushed his way through the door at full speed. His hand released yours as he charged in. Mr. Holden had been walking around the middle of the store checking over things. Immediately, he turned at the sound.
What's wrong?
What? Where's the fire? He froze when he got a look at Cove's face. He worriedly opened his mouth, probably to ask what's wrong, but then Cove launched himself at his father. Cove threw his arms around Mr. Holden's neck. He buried his face in his dad's shoulder and started to sob with deep, hitching breaths. Why is there no CG? Why is there no art? You clearly have to show me art of this moment, damn it! And they're not giving me that, are they? Cliff clearly had no idea what was going on. His hands hovered awkwardly in the air. He looked at you for a brief second, hoping for understanding before turning all his attention on Cove. Oh, they are! Okay. I was like, are you not gonna give me an actual art for this scene? Cove breaking down with his dad. Dad's face is a little off, but I'm okay with that. They're giving me this He wrapped both his arms around Cove's back. Cove looked secure in his father's embrace, protected and safe. It's okay. You'll be okay. Whatever it is, it's gonna be okay. Cove kept crying. He inhaled deeply, his voice choking up when he tried to speak.
I'm so sorry.
You always tried to be there for me when I was growing up, and I was mean to you. I'm sorry.
What?
What? He's like, what's going on? What was I told? What was told to my boy? Mr. Holden was completely taken aback. He hadn't expected this to be the issue. You don't have to apologize for that, bud. Kids are allowed to be mad at their parents. It's my job to take care of you. I didn't do anything special. Cove shook his head as emphatically as he could while he still tucked against his dad. You've always supported me no matter what. You've always loved me, and I wish I realized sooner how much you did. Cove squeezed him tighter. Thank you. I love you, Dad. At his son's heartfelt confession, the father became choked up as well. He compressed Cove into a crushing hug. I do love you. I always will. You can count on that. I want to be there for you too. They clung to one another, absorbed in the moment, then, after a little while longer, they slowly began to loosen their hold. Cove sniffled and moved so he could use his palm to wipe away his tears. His dad's shirt was damp where his face had been. Cliff patted the top of Cove's shoulder. He looked at his son with pride. You've grown up so much. Cove started to laugh through his tears, a wavering smile on his lips. You doubted that Cove would have ever thought that crying on his dad's shoulder was a sign of maturity, but it was true. Cove had changed over the years. Cove used to cry a lot over his parents, and he still did. Despite the similarities, the defining Coveness, there was a big difference between the two occasions. You were proud of him. Cove wiped his eyes again. You're a good dad. You're a good son. Mr. Holden was plainly touched by the words and beamed at his beloved child. Cove looked away and shyly traced his scar. Cliff chuckled and released Cove to rub the back of his neck. The earlier panic had bled off and left the confusion. I'm glad we had this shot, but what was it that made you cry in the first place? You weren't too bad when you left here before. Oh, dear boy. Your wife had some words to say to us. Your ex-wife had some words to say to us. Oh. Cove ducked his head further, getting a very good look at the scuff marks on the floor. I called Mom. I wanted to talk to her about all this. He kicked one of his feet shyly, swinging it back and forth against the ground. Things felt really hard when I was younger, but it wasn't just me going through stuff, Dad. You never give yourself credit. Cliff smiled gently and gripped Cove's shoulder with reassurance.
Oh.
Kyra is an amazing person to come to my defense. For me, the only hard part was seeing you and her unhappy. Everything else, that was nothing. He wrapped an arm around Cove's neck and another side hug. Cove leaned into the embrace and glanced up at his dad. Your old man is tougher than he looks. Check out how powerful these arms are. And this is 10 years on. I was in my prime those days. Cove laughed. It was a light sound full of fondness. Okay. He quieted down a little, finding a quick moment of seriousness. Thanks again, Dad. I know you don't want me to feel bad, and I'm happy. Because of everything you and Mom did, I have a really nice life. Mr. Holden's countenance became much more serious. He didn't take what was said lightly. Cove, you're very welcome. That's so good to hear. He let Cove go. This time they both took a step back to their normal proximity. Mr. Holden cleared his throat. He looked at you right in the eyes.
That's a relief.
I also appreciate that you were here for support, Blue. What a loyal partner. Cove looked back down, embarrassed. Ha ha! I'm glad I could be here. You're both so sweet. You grinned at the two couple of big softies. You grinned at the two couple of big softies. That doesn't sound right. That sentence does not sound right. You grinned at the two You grinned at the two of them being a couple of big softies. I don't know how to make that sound better. That was my best attempt. Cliff smiled warmly. He nudged Cove gently as if to say, "Look how lucky you are!" "Hey, maybe I ought to give you another $20 for all this. You put up with a lot over the years." Cove turned to you, shaking his head. "I told you that you got a bad deal.
No.
But seriously, Dad, you have to stop offering her money." Ha ha! I'm gonna laugh. We're gonna laugh. Cliff was a riot.
Sure.
Okay. I'll leave making jokes about that to Cove. Cove smiled, satisfied at that. All right. Cove exhaled slowly, his posture relaxing. We'd better get going. You still have a lot of work, Dad, and I think Blue has been patient enough. Absolutely. This took an hour, I think. What are we at? Yeah, we're at an hour, Cove. An hour. I love you. But an hour for one moment. I didn't bring her here to watch me cry to my parents. Cliff grinned and waved the two of you off. Sure thing. I'm happy you both stopped in, but you gotta have some fun. Be careful out there. I don't need to go jet skiing anymore, Blue. If you still want to go, I don't mind watching. No way! You're a mature young man. If you want to jet ski, then you should go out and go jet ski. I'll still be here if you need anything, right? Yeah, okay. Let's get a move on! Cove waved his dad as he started walking out. You followed. When you turned back to Mr. Holden before you went out the door, he was waving. Bye, kids. You'll do great. Once again, it had become today's habit. You and Cove walked down the dock side by side, but this time Cove had a bounce in his step. His smile was soft but radiant. Thanks for staying. And sorry for how long it took. You do the same for me. You had his back and he had yours. It was just how things went between the two of you. He sidestepped in to lean closer to you and wrapped his arms around you. You relaxed into his embrace as he held you tightly. You hugged him back. You could smell the scent of the ocean on the breeze and felt the warmth of his chest. He exhaled and took a step back, his face a dazzling smile. The water lapped at the docks beneath your feet, and Cove looked down when a particularly strong wave crashed against it. It's weird to think about my parents' relationship. There's all this stuff that I don't know because I wasn't there, or because I was just a kid because I didn't even exist yet. It feels really complicated. Relationships are complicated. You agreed with him. Connections to other people were as varied as there were waves in the ocean. Cove nodded without elaboration. He looked out onto the ocean wistfully for a moment before he shook it off.
It's nice.
I'm happy they were married, even if they didn't stay together in the end. I'm happy that you're all peppy again. Peppy? That's right. If you say so. Let's ask, my boy. Are you scared of it? What? Marriage, because of your parents' history? You talked about your future together before, but now that you had more context for Cove's experience in his family, you couldn't help but ask specifically about marriage. Cove shook his head shyly. He didn't hesitate for a second. No, surprisingly, I don't have issues about the idea of getting married someday. You looked at him, not bothering to hide your intrigue. He chuckled self-consciously at the reaction he got.
I mean,
don't get me wrong. I'm trying to actually propose would be terrifying. But I'm sure planning the whole wedding would be so hard, especially for me, but just the thought of having someone I loved, that I was married to, that I'd spend my whole life with, that doesn't scare me. It actually makes me happy to think about it. Both of you snuck smiles at each other. The color of his cheeks deepened as his voice grew smaller. Are you thinking about how you might want to get married sometime? Yeah. I would. You felt your emotions buzzing as you admitted to Cove of all people. You may have filled in the final blanks, but you knew but you both knew those. What is that sentence? But you both knew those words meant marrying him is what you wanted. But you both knew those words meant marrying him was what you wanted. It sounds bad no matter how you put it. I don't know what happened with that sentence. Cool, that's cool. Marriage is, nice. Cove! He let out a trembling laugh and desperately searched for a way to calm his obviously rising nervous tide. He settled on changing the subject. Alright, no more distractions. Let's go. It's time to jet ski. You laughed at him loudly. He only looked more determined. You were going to jet ski. The two of you began more quickly make your way across the boards. Despite your excitement, you were both careful. Neither of you wanted an accident, especially after what happened with Cove's first jet skiing trip. You finally got to the rental place. You were surprised how easy the process was. It took no time at all for Cove to climb on his jet ski with shaky legs. I'm renting my own! I'm not sitting on the sidelines and watching Cove! You spent this entire time wanting to jet ski and were thrilled to finally climb onto one. It was lime green with blue detailing. The jet ski rocked slightly as you got on, bobbing with the waves. He looked across at Cove. He sat motionlessly astride his jet ski, preparing himself to start it up. Even from your distance, you could tell his hands were clamped onto the handles too tightly. He was stiff and nervous. Are you gonna check it out now? Go, Cove, you can do it! You cheered him on and clapped wildly. His body language relaxed slightly, and he turned his head to look at you.
Thanks.
Aww, you're welcome, Cove. He inhaled slowly and started up the jet ski. It roared forward, and you were surprised you could hear him squeak over the sound of the engine. He stopped after a few seconds, then breathed again. After he calmed down, he started it once more. Cove sputtered and stalled for a while, going a little further each time. He grew more comfortable with the feel. He continued to struggle with the jet ski, but he refused to let that stop him. He kept going until he wrangled the machine into submission. Cove eventually reached the point where he only stopped the jet ski when he had something to say. He kept shouting things at you. This is amazing! Did you see that, Blue? This is so great! You had got your own jet ski going as well. You made sure to keep a safe distance. Cove watched what you did with enthusiasm. Nice turn! He zoomed forward and you could hear his bright laugh ring across the waves. You cheered for him again, whooping whenever he did something fun. I'm gonna do that. There was something intuitive about it. You had no trouble controlling the machine and enjoying the freedom it offered. I myself have jet skied in Hawaii, and it was like one of the funnest parts of the trip. And I enjoyed it, even though I absolutely despise salt water. I hate it. I hate salt water so much. I can't do it. But jet skiing was fun. It was the second funnest thing on the trip besides the parasailing. You sped around the ocean with a wide smile on your face. Eventually, the sun set and you had to pack up. Cove was thankfully still in one piece, no cast necessary. After everything was returned, Cove dug his phone out of his bag and texted his parents to let them know all about his triumph. An idea to take a photo to mark the occasion struck Cove, and he wanted you to join him in the selfie. You posed and Cove tried to follow your lead. He took a few pictures and you pointed out the best one. You liked how it turned out and he sent it to you. It would be a nice memory. His phone vibrated after only a moment after texting it out. Mr. Holden and Kyra likely had been waiting the entire day to find out how this outing would go. And with the news of his success, both Cove's parents sent back how proud they were of Cove for how far he'd come. Watching him grinning in the setting sun after facing so many fears that day, you felt the same. And voila, there we go. Oh my god, that took forever, but I love every moment that was put into it. I think it's probably the best moment that we've gotten so far, because there's so much about Cove's life that is put into that I enjoyed it. I enjoyed that. So thank you all for joining me as we continue our life beginning and always with the Step 3 DLC. This is most likely going to be 5 episodes based on how long this one took. So I will be doing all of it. You will get all the DLC. Except for the other couples. I will not be doing the other characters' DLCs. And that's just because of a personal choice of how this game was for me. And I will also do, obviously, Step 4 when it comes out. But thank you for joining me. I will catch you all on the flip side as we return to another adventure with Cove in our life. Bye, everybody.